Welcome to Lead Well, Live Whole. I'm your host, Michael Sirmon. Every episode, we'll spend a few minutes exploring the challenges, questions, and realities of everyday life, because success means little if you lose yourself in the process. So take a breath, settle in, and let's spend a few minutes exploring life together. If you're joining me for the first time, this podcast is for leaders, professionals, and everyday people who want to succeed without losing themselves in the process. Today, we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough: potential. Most of us have been taught that potential is a gift, and it is. But potential can also be a burden. In fact, some of the most overwhelmed people I know are not struggling because they have too few opportunities. They're struggling because they have too many. Too many ideas, too many possibilities, too many open doors, too many directions they could go, too many what-ifs. And if we're not careful, the very thing we once prayed for can become the thing that steals our peace. So today, let's sit back, breathe, and talk about the weight of potential. Welcome back to Lead Well, Live Whole. I'm Michael Sirmon. Potential can be heavy. When I was younger, I thought more opportunities would solve my problems. If I could just get promoted, if I could just earn more money, if I could just have more influence, if I could just have more choices, then life would somehow become easier. But what I've discovered is that every opportunity creates a decision, and every decision creates responsibility. The more doors that open, the more pressure we feel to choose correctly. And maybe you've felt it. You have several good options in front of you: a new job, a business idea, a ministry opportunity. Maybe it's a project or a relationship. Maybe it's a move, a dream you've carried for years. Now, none of them are bad. In fact, many of them are good. But the abundance of options often leaves you stuck, not because you lack potential, but because you're carrying too much of it. And what I've learned over the years is that potential is not purpose. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you're supposed to do it. And that's difficult for high performers. That's difficult for people who are used to just charging ahead and making their own way in life, because high performers are very capable people. They learn quickly. They adapt quickly. They often succeed in multiple environments, and because of that, they confuse capability with calling. Capability asks, what can I do? Calling asks, what should I do? And they're not the same question. Moses had the potential to remain a prince. David had the potential to remain a shepherd. Peter had the potential to remain a fisherman, yet God called them into something different. Not because they lacked potential elsewhere, but because purpose mattered more than possibility. Now, many of us spend years chasing what we can do while neglecting what we were actually called to do. So Tammy and I, in our daily proclamations and prayers, some of the things that we pray and that we talk about are that opportunities, resources, and the right people align as we move, that today is a great day and we're leading it with intent, that we are created for purpose and not for drift. And because of that, we can see clearly and we can act decisively. And when we do that, then we're building strength mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, relationally, right? And we don't want to rush it. We want to be very intentional about what we're doing. Because again, many of us spend years chasing what we can do while neglecting what we're actually called to do. There's a myth in the business world, but in America in general. And that myth says that maximizing is everything. Our culture constantly tells us to maximize your income, maximize your influence, maximize your productivity, maximize your platform, maximize your gifts. I mean, even maximize your spending. We create the Costco's and the Sam's Clubs and the IKEAs and these places we can go and we can buy in bulk because more is better. And as a result, we're running around and we're renting places to store more stuff. and we're getting bigger houses and we're packing them full of everything that we can. And it's a distraction and it's a clutter that begins to weigh us down. Because while growth is important, there's a hidden danger in trying to maximize everything. Because we eventually become responsible for more than we were ever meant to carry. Think about this question. What if your purpose isn't to maximize every gift? What if your purpose is actually to faithfully steward the gifts that matter the most in this season? Right? Because not every gift carries the same weight in every season. The right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. Think about Jesus for a minute. He healed people. He taught crowds. He performed miracles. Yet he didn't heal every sick person in Israel. He didn't visit every town. He didn't solve every problem. Even Jesus operated within boundaries. He was perfectly aligned with his mission. And because he knew his mission, he could say no to things that weren't part of it. Now, many of us are exhausted because we're trying to be available for assignments God never gave us. But there's another side to the conversation, and that's the burden of untapped potential. See, many people don't feel burdened by what they're doing. They feel burdened by what they're not doing. And maybe that's you. You look at your life and you wonder, what if I started that business? What if I wrote that book? Hey, what if I took that opportunity? What if I had just chosen differently? What if I'm wasting my gifts? What if I'm falling behind? And social media has not helped in the struggle. In fact, it's only intensified it. Because as humans, we tend to want to compare ourselves to everybody else. And online, people build up these false personas that magnify every little thing they're doing and makes everything just look so perfect, and everybody's so overachieving, and you feel less than because you're not, you haven't reached the 400,000 followers. I got happy today because on my podcast got 199 followers, right? So, but on LinkedIn and on Facebook and all the different social media platforms, somebody's always launching a company. Somebody's always traveling around the world. They're building a ministry. They're becoming an author. They're buying a dream home. Someone has reached a milestone. And before long, we start grieving lives we never had. But here's the hard truth. Often, we're grieving futures God never intended for us. Let that sink in just for a minute. Not every possibility is your assignment. Not every dream belongs to you. Not every open door leads to the right destination. Because a lot of times, opportunities are simply distractions dressed as potential. Detours to pull us off the path that was laid out for us to walk down. But the thing is, in my life, I found that faith is a good simplifier of potential. Because one of the most freeing lessons I've learned is that faith changes the question. The world asks, what is the highest version of yourself? Faith doesn't ask that. Faith asks, what is the most faithful version of yourself? And those questions lead to very different lives. One is rooted in achievement. The other in obedience. Noah didn't know he was building a story people would discuss thousands of years later. He simply built the boat. Joseph didn't know prison was preparation for leadership. He simply remained faithful. Ruth didn't know her story would become part of the lineage of Christ. She simply took the next step. The common thread wasn't certainty, it was faithfulness. God rarely gives us the entire blueprint. In fact, early on, I realized he couldn't give me the blueprint because if I could see the path, I would look for the shortcut to get to it because getting to it was the goal. But God's goal for us was the journey, right? Because it's the journey where you build your strength, the journey where you learn the lessons you need to learn, the journey where you build the tools and you become accustomed to the weapons that you're going to need for this next battle. So God doesn't give us the entire blueprint. Not rarely. Some people he does. But most of the time, he gives us just enough light for the next step. And that's where many of us struggle. Right? When the Bible says that man develops his plan, and we jump on that, I've made my plan, so God bless it. But it goes on to say, but God directs their path. God directs their footsteps, right? Because we would rather know the destination than trust the process, but God knows that it's the process that it molds us and shapes us into who we're supposed to be. Does that mean we don't ask questions? No, there are questions worth asking. Because if you're carrying the weight of potential today, there are a few questions I want you to reflect on. What opportunities are creating anxiety in your life? Which opportunities align with your values? Which opportunities align with your season? Which opportunities align with your calling? And if you don't know that, then get quiet, spend some time, create that margin, and let that conversation happen with yourself and with God, and you will begin to understand your calling. But most importantly, which opportunities are simply distractions? Because you know what? Not every open door is an assignment, and not every possibility deserves your energy. Not every invitation deserves your yes. In fact, the most spiritual thing you can do is choose fewer things and do them faithfully. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this thought. You do not have to become every version of yourself. You don't have to pursue every opportunity. You don't have to maximize every talent, every gift, and every opportunity. You don't have to fulfill every possibility. Your responsibility is to be faithful with what's been entrusted to you. Maybe peace isn't found in reaching your full potential. Maybe peace is found in faithfully living the life God actually called you to live. I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. And if this episode encouraged you, challenged you, or made you think differently, I would appreciate it if you would share it with a friend, family member, coworker, or someone who may need to hear it. And be sure to follow the podcast wherever you're listening and subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Every share, every follow, and every subscription helps us to reach more people who are trying to lead well and live whole. Until next time, remember, lead well, live whole, and don't lose yourself along the way.